What's up, everybody? Chuck Bailey with the Bass Channel here, and today we're going to be talking about the Ampeg Ventures series amplifiers and cabs. Let's check it out. So if you guys recall, last year we did a piece on the SGT DI, and basically what this is the amplifier version of that DI. So essentially what the SGT DI had and what it was really pushing was that overdrive circuit that this had, along with the B15 voicing that it offers. Really awesome, amazing, kind of iconic bass tone. So again, if you're familiar with the SGT DI and the tone capabilities that it offers, this is basically the amplifier version of that with a lot more bells and whistles. Let's just run down those bells and whistles, yeah? So this is their variable compressor. It only comes on the V7 and the V12 amplifier. It is not offered on the V3. But if you have the V7 or the V12, you have this variable compressor. It's very musical. It sounds amazing. And you can dial it to taste. So if you really want to squash that and get that high and tight, you can. And if you want to just let it rip and be open, you can do that too. Next switch on this is the ultra high, ultra low. Everybody that's played Ampeg knows exactly what these are. You get those ultra low frequencies kind of boosted if you're going the ultra low, and you get those ultra high frequencies boosted if you go the other way. So they kept it pretty consistent. So if you're an Ampeg fan, it's going to be familiar, which is nice. Then you have the on and off for the voicings and for the super grit technology. That's the SGT part. Okay, so these switches right here, they're independent of each other. So when you turn the SGT part on or off, that engages the SGT technology for the overdrive circuit. And then right next to it, you can go with the SVT tone voicing, or you can go with the B15 tone voicing. Both very unique, both sound great. Then next knob, you have the grit level. So that dials in exactly what you would think as far as the grit from the SGT overdrive circuit that you are engaging back here on these two switches. bass knob here, this is the normal layout that they have for a lot of their amplifiers. They have their sweepable mid frequency. This is also a stack knob, so this is great. It goes from 200 all the way to 3K, so that's pretty impressive. Treble and your volume knob, and you have your mute switch. So with that on, you can mute the amplifier, and then the other way it's ready to play. And your peak indicator, which obviously because it's not lit, you can't see that, but you know what that is. If it's hitting too hot, it'll show you a flashing red light and you can dial it back. And then there's the back, right? It's pretty standard. It's kind of kept the meat and potatoes. You got your power supply. You got your speaker cable connections here. You got your auxiliary out, your effects loop, and then you have your DI out, which is your pre and post connection, your ground lift. So all of those right there, pretty convenient, easily read and labeled, and the same markings and how they label everything is on all of the amps, just like that. One cool thing that I saw with this is that you have foot switchable options for the SVT voicing and the B15 voicing. So if you hook up an AFS 2 foot switch to this amplifier, you'll be able to engage and disengage the different voicings with just the hit of the switch. So I thought that was cool that Ampeg planned for that. The cabinet has an attenuated horn, so you can have it, you know, on, off, or attenuated, however you want to do that. It's how you want to engage it. All three options to us sounded pretty cool in their own respect, but I mean, it's there if you want to change it. And Ampeg is going with a brand new speaker. For this Venture series, they're using Lavos neodymium speakers. So I don't know a lot about Lavos. I can tell you that they sound phenomenal. I think you guys will be very impressed by what Ampeg's been able to accomplish with this amplifier and cabinet combination. So all the tones and everything you're going to hear, we ran through the Venture Series 212. For our members, we also ran the V1200, or the V12, excuse me, the 1200 watt amp through our Ampeg 810, and we're going to do a side-by-side comparison on a separate video of the SGT DI to the V12. So you guys are going to get to see that in the members only videos, and be looking out for those soon. Thank you again, Ampeg, for getting us this amazing amplifier and cabinet. We appreciate your support. Thank you for your trust in us. Thank you to all of our subscribers. This is Chuck Bailey with the Bass Channel, and we will see you next time. If you send them Decibel 10 in your contact for a build, you'll get 10% off of your total build. What's up, everybody? Chuck Bailey with the Bass Channel here, and today we're going to be checking out the Gripper 3 Custom from Decibel Sound. Let's go. My journey down this road starts far before this bass even came into the picture. When I first started working with the Bass Channel, this bass brought out feelings in me that I hadn't felt in a long time, especially when it came to 4 strings. I got a chance to play this for some of the footage that we did in studio with Jeff Basso. He's also a regular contributor on the Guitar Channel. He was like shocked, and he's like, that's the most recordable sounding bass tone that I've ever heard. And it was direct. It was the bass to his console, and that was it. And listening to the playback in some of the older videos, I was like, I agree. It was very crisp, round. There was punchiness to it. It didn't fight you, and I don't know if it's a testament to the build quality from Gibson back then, or whatever the magic combo was. You know, these are Bill Lawrence S1 pickups. These are the original Bill Lawrence S1 pickups, and a very simple setup. It's volume and tone, and it's got a 3-way selector. So the $1.50 situation is in the middle, all 3, up, front 2, back 2. And every single choice sounds good, but in the middle with all 3, that's the mojo. That's the sweet spot. this led me down this crazy rabbit hole, and I started doing as much reverb research as I could to see if I can get my hands on one of these, and they are available, but not very cheap. So that brings me back to this. Decibel Sound Implements. I reached out to Jeremy McNeil, tremendous luthier. He's based out of Georgia. He has so many awesome, off-the-wall, really unique builds, and he has a lot of them that fall under that shadow of body shapes and designs that are unique, but also very much so, tribute, for lack of a better word, to its predecessors, and that's where I came up with this. My whole goal was to use the same sauce, the same recipe that Gibson followed, minus the 46-year gap. April of 78, April of 2024, 46 years, 46 years between the two. I wanted the same situation, so maple neck, maple board, maple body. Jeremy reached out to Curtis Novak, and his obsessive compulsive detail when it comes to these recreation of these pickups is so astoundingly accurate. He goes off specs and the sheets from the original pickups and the design down to the winds, down to the wire, down to everything being exact. And that's exactly what these pickups are. These are Curtis Novak's kind of homage to the Bill Lawrence S1 pickups, and they sound phenomenal. This bass delivers, hands down. Is it exact like a 46-year-old instrument, like the one that it's modeled after? No. Does it sound good? Yeah. Does it stick out in a mix? Yes. Is it punchy? Does it give you tones that sound tremendous? Yes, absolutely. It hits all of those boxes. Boom, boom, boom. I lucked out that Jeremy had this color because blue is my favorite color ever. And it's a really beautiful kind of metallic blue, and he has this kind of vintage shellac on the neck and the board. Cool little design with his company logo on the back of the neck plate too. All Hipshot hardware. Big thanks to Jason and all of the crew over at Hipshot for sending that over. Super appreciated, so we can get this to you. And this has been a long time coming, so we're a little behind on this, and I apologize to Jeremy, but I promise you to Jeremy and to everyone else, it's worth the wait. Here's some differences that we noticed with respect to the new build versus the 78. First thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is this bridge. This hip shot bridge, tremendously different from this 46-year-old bridge on the G3. Is it something that I think weighs heavily in on the tone? No, I think it's gonna have some small effect, for lack of a better term, on the overall balance and the character that the bass has, but I don't think it's something that's gonna drastically change it. Another thing is the older 78 Gibson is string through. That's a string through body. Originally, that's how they were built, that's how it was made, that's how it was done. This is not. It is not string through. Chris ordered a set of 45 to 100 Elixir stainless strings. 2 sets. I took them to Made on Earth Guitars, Brandon Jones, our local luthier slash tech slash amazing guy for all things stringed in Vegas. He did the exact same setup for both instruments. So the instruments have the same string height. They're set up completely the same. The exact same strings. And everything else, according to what we know about the instruments, are equal. Maple body, maple neck, maple board, with the Curtis Novak historically accurate pickups being the same, from wire type to wines, etc. So everything, for all intents and purposes, minus the bridge and the string through parts that we discussed, are identical. Chris did some research on the Gibson builds back then and what their baseline prices were, and the baseline average price for these models, and this model particularly because of the finish, was slightly more expensive, but the baseline average in the mid-70s for this particular instrument through Gibson was $479. Now, when you adjust that to inflation for today's cost, it's roughly $2,300 and some change. These entry level with everything, as far as I know, depending on your specs and what you want, because obviously the more bells and whistles you want added, it adds up for everyone, you and Jeremy. But he's averaging $2,400 to $2,600 for a brand new build. So he's pretty much there. I think that's pretty awesome that his costs are right in line with where the cost would have been for exactly 46-year apart instruments from when they were coming off of a production floor, when they were all being built by hand by all of those guys out of Tennessee or wherever they were, Kalamazoo, I think it was, something like that, to now. And Jeremy's he's a one-man wrecking crew. Like it's pretty awesome that he's, even if it was inadvertent, that he's paying attention to his cost to make his instruments as affordable as possible with respect to the times that we're living in. And Jeremy is kind enough to offer a 10% discount through the bass channel. So if you contact him, and the contact information will be below, and you send him the, what do you call it? Just the phrase or the wording, decibel 10. If you send him decibel 10 in your contact for a build, you'll get 10% off of your total build. But if you're looking for a quality instrument custom built to your exact specs, from paint to finish to woods used to pickups, go check out Decibel Sound, man. Like, honestly, like some of the prices have come down a little bit on the older Gibsons you can find on Reverb, but still, you're taking a chance. Is that truss rod gonna work? Are there going to be issues with the electronics for a 40-plus-year-old instrument? Not all of them are gonna be as lucky as Chris's 78 that he has here, which is in pretty much immaculate condition. And yeah, the tone is very much so close, but also very much so different. Let us know in the comments what you thought. How do you think the Decibel Gripper 3 stood up against the G3? Thank you guys for watching, and gals and everyone in between. This is Chuck Bailey with the Bass Channel, and we will see you next time.
Today on the Bass Channel, we're taking a deep dive into the XO variable crossover from Great Eastern Effects. first thing we need to understand about the XO variable crossover is that it's not an effect in and of itself, but rather a tool to get more out of your existing effects. To put it simply, the XO takes your input signal and splits it into high and low frequency bands and sends those into two separate loops. As bass players, we're more than familiar with the idea of a dry blend, especially when using any kind of distortion. In the past, this was best achieved with the Boss LS2 or another similar pedal such as the EHX Tri-Parallel Mixer or the JHS Switchback. While those pedals worked great at providing a parallel clean signal, they weren't necessarily designed with only that purpose in mind. These pedals are more focused on loop switching, whether it be switching between two different effects loops or between two different outputs. The clean blend feature was more of a bonus hack than anything else. While the allure of a clean blend alongside distortion is obvious, the main problem is you also get a clean top end. The clean upper frequencies alongside the dirty frequencies usually make for an artificial and unnatural sounding tone. This is where the XO steps things up a notch. Rather than two identical loops, each loop is separated by frequency, meaning you can send the upper frequencies through the distortion, or really any effect, while keeping your clean signal focused on only the low end, giving you a much more natural sounding dirty tone. In this video, we're mostly going to be focusing on using this pedal with distortion because that's where the advantage is best felt, especially on a quick YouTube demo video, but of course you can run any pedal you see fit through either of the loops. Whether that be a phaser on the low end and a dimension chorus on the top end, or a low end octave coupled with an envelope for the higher frequencies, it's ultimately up to you. But in my humble opinion, there are few things more valuable than finding the drive tone that works perfectly in the context of your setup. So now that we understand what the XO does, let's take a look at the controls. It's also good to point out that up until now, all of the tones you've heard are fed from the XO main out into a Kemper profile of an SVT. But for this next example, instead of having both loops feed back into the pedal, each pedal out is running into a separate input on the interface. From there, the Ampeg SVT Suite plugin has been added for some level of consistency in the overall tone. I've set it up this way so you can hear each loop on its own throughout the upcoming changes. First up is the crossover frequency control. This control dictates the crossover point for both loops. Turning this knob up or clockwise moves the center frequency up so that only the uppermost frequencies are fed through the top loop, which in this video is the distortion, while the rest of the frequencies below run through the bottom loop, which in this case is a compressor. let's go back and hear that same sample again with just the low loop soloed. You'll hear more higher frequencies fed into the compressor as the knob rotates clockwise. And here it is again with the high loop soloed. As the knob rotates clockwise, you'll hear fewer low and mid frequencies going into the rat pedal. Turning the knob in the opposite direction has the opposite effect. More frequencies are fed through the top loop, or distortion, while only the lowest lows run through the bottom loop, or compressor. Like before, let's hear the same sample with each of the loops solo. First up is the low loop. As the knob turns counterclockwise, fewer mid-range frequencies are fed into the compressor. And on the high loop, you'll hear more mid-range frequencies running into the distortion as the knob turns counterclockwise. The range switch changes the range of the crossover frequency. With the switch in the up position, the crossover is optimized for guitar signals ranging from 300 Hz to 3.4 kHz. With the range switch in the down position, it ranges from 50 Hz to 600 Hz, which is more optimized for bass. Once again, we'll listen to both sweeps with each loop solo. First up is the low loop, guitar range, then bass range. And now the same thing with just the high loop. The send flip switch swaps the signal going into the high and low sends. One more time, let's listen to each loop on its own during the flip. The phase switch reverses the phase of the loops. This is helpful if one of the pedals you're using flips the polarity of the signal. Engaging this button will put your two signals back in phase. At this point, I'm going to switch back to the previous setup of both loops returning to the pedal and going into 1 amp to better show the next couple of features. The return balance knob adjusts the relative level of the two loops. This is an easy way to quickly balance the levels of each effect. The dry blend allows you to blend the clean, unaffected signal with whatever tone you've built with the two loops. We talked a minute ago about the LS2's clean blend function as being kind of a bit of a hack. Well, this pedal also has somewhat of a hack of its own. When nothing is plugged into the send and return, those jacks are linked, which basically turns this pedal into a tilt EQ. You then use the return balance to tilt the signal darker or brighter. You can also use the crossover control to move the center frequency of that tilt. And finally, you can also use this pedal in a bona fide biamp setup. One send will output the selected high frequencies to the guitar amp, while the other sends the selected low frequencies to the bass amp. You can also run another full frequency signal to a third amp using the out jack and turning the dry blend all the way up. Now, that particular setup I described is a little bit too complex to show within the confines of this particular video, but just know that that is a possibility. That just about covers the basics of the XO variable crossover. Again, there are so many ways to incorporate this pedal into your setup that we couldn't possibly even begin to scratch the surface in this particular video. However, for bass players, combining a drive with your clean low end or even an octave or compressor like we've done here might be one of the more popular setups. I know that I've been waiting for a pedal like this for years. You may even remember I made a video a few years back setting up a makeshift version of something like this using an LS2 with two 10-band EQs to get close to this this effect. While my method was one long way to go, having all of that functionality in one standard size pedal is much more convenient than having 3 or more pedals do the same job. So if you want to learn more about the XO variable crossover or get one for yourself, head over to GreatEasternEffects.com. If you liked this video, please help us out by doing all the YouTube algorithm stuff, likes, dislikes, comments, subscribe, send to your friends, show your grandma, whatever. But until next time, be safe, and I'll see you later.
What's up, everybody? Chuck Bailey with the Bass Channel here, and today we're going to be checking out the Punchline from JHS. Let's go. So it doesn't really take an eagle eye to notice that this pedal is a collaboration between JHS and the Beach Boys. Now, of course the Beach Boys are awesome, but on this channel we're of the opinion that limiting signature gear to only the music of the signature isn't necessarily fair to the gear. Therefore, you're not going to hear any Beach Boys songs in this video at all. Plot twist. No. Look, we know it can do Beach Boys, but and I know it says Beach Boys on the pedal, but look, if you want to hear a bunch of killer vintage flat wound tones, Philip Conrad has a great video on this pedal as well, so you can check that out. But instead, we're going to run a variety of basses, tones, and styles to give you an idea of how this pedal can sound for the modern working bass player, which is what most of the players in this video are. So, with that said, let's check it out. So a minute ago I mentioned working bass players. Naturally, that's a pretty broad term, but when it comes to sessions and cover gigs, many, if not most players, are looking to get the most tone with the least amount of gear. The biggest bang for your buck, if you will, and the most tone without breaking the bank or your back. That's where the Punchline comes in clutch. This is the bass pedal version of that saying, everything but the kitchen sink, where the kitchen sink in this case would be a tuner. Outside of that, this single box is equipped with just about everything most players would realistically need. And I say most because the whole octave flanger synth reverb gang is going to show up in full force, and I know in the comments at any minute. But anyway, the Punchline features a VCA compressor, a drive section, amp sim, and a 3-band EQ. So with all of that said, let's start from the beginning. We're gonna go over the amp sim. It's an analog bass amp simulation, and it's particularly effective when sending the signal directly to mixers, interfaces, PA systems, or front of house speakers. The gain knob adds tube-like harmonics and a really nice gritty color. And the presence control adjusts high and upper mid-range content, and I feel like it's an indispensable tool when your tone needs an extra push to cut through the mix. The compressor is a studio-grade VCA bass compressor that shapes the dynamics using ratio and threshold controls, plus a gain range of plus or minus 20 dB. The LED on the pedal's top right corner will illuminate when the signal meets the compression threshold, and that lets you know the circuit is active. This drive pushes clean sounds into vintage tinged breakup, and the added clean control is a killer feature that mixes clean signal back into the overdrive. And finally, the always-on mastering and EQ center. This section stays active even when the pedal is bypassed. You get a flexible 3-band EQ in the backs and all style. The master volume control affects the overall output and is highly interactive with the other volume and gain parameters. Comp pre-mode places the compressor first in the punchline signal chain. Comp post slots the compressor after the drive and amp sim sections for a vastly different sound. So, in closing, my final thoughts is you never know you want or need something until you think about wanting or needing something and you experience it. No, I don't like that. Let me rephrase that because I know what I want to say, but that didn't come out right.
Chuck will return to his thoughts after a quick word from our sponsor.
So in closing, this is one of those things that I didn't know I wanted or needed. I have been very fortunate with the gear I get to experience firsthand at the Bass Channel, and I'm super happy JHS sent us this. It's probably, outside of like bass guitars, this is probably my favorite piece of gear I've received all year. It's super usable. It's very, very, very awesome as far as the options it gives you, and that VCA compressor is, I love it. It sounds so good. And I've been on a real P-bass kick lately, and I've been messing around with the McGrath P-bass that we have, and some of the ones that we have in the back behind, and even the jazz basses like my Flea 61 reissue and my GNL. It makes everything sound punchy and full. It brings out all the clarity in those clean tones, and when you kick that grid on, it just gives this real nice vintage dig that you would get from really digging into like a tube, a very old tube style sound. It's tremendously worth whatever dollar amount it is. And I'm pretty sure I was talking to Cormac at McGrath Guitars, and he told me that it just dropped $100 online. So this is the perfect time for you to go get one. It is a 10 out of 10 for me. So in closing, thank you to JHS for sending this pedal to us and to show you. And of course, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I'm Chuck Bailey with the Bass Channel, and if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. And if you didn't, there's a dislike button also. But anyway, here's Wonderwall.
Today on the Bass Channel, I am extremely excited and proud to present to you the Bass Channel signature Thunder Horse 4 from McGrath Guitars. So let's just start at the beginning. This project started off as a wacky one-off idea to showcase McGrath's custom order capabilities, but since then has taken on an entirely different life. We were introduced to McGrath guitars a couple months back, and we made a video showing one of their stock P-Bass models. But in that video, Chuck said,
You tell them the color you want, the electronics you want. The point is you get to pick everything.
which got my brain firing into trying to come up with something not only totally different, but as realistically versatile as possible. Don't get me wrong, the stock P-Bass model that we looked at from McGrath was great. I particularly liked the flatter 12-inch radius and some other construction appointments, but at the end of the day, and I mean no disrespect here, it was a P-Bass. And doing this now for 9 years, I've seen P-Basses, I've seen jazz basses, and there's really not much you can do at this point to those models that's going to impress me that much. So in dreaming up this custom one-off idea that I thought it was going to be at the time, I looked back to this wall for inspiration. Obviously all of these basses are totally different. They serve their own specific purpose, but of the 27 that are back here, there's a couple that are really stand out. First and foremost would be this one. Now, I know I just kind of shit on P-Basses a minute ago, but this is a particularly great feeling and great sounding precision bass. Back in 2017, June 3rd, 2017 to be specific, I made a video installing these EMG Geezer PJ pickups, and I was so blown away by the tone that they're never leaving this bass. So this was kind of the cornerstone of the Thunder Horse. I love passive EMGs, and I definitely wanted that to be included in this project. Next up is this bass. This is a 2015 Gibson SG bass. I've had this for a few years, and I'll be honest, it took me a couple years to really figure out where its strengths lie and how to use it. But once I did, this thing was definitely eye-opening, and it was an epiphany for me on what it can do. Now, this specific one right here is currently fretless. Just ignore that for the moment, and instead let's focus right here. This is Gibson's modern take on what has now become known as the Mudbucker, the Sidewinder, or more simply, the EB pickup. Now, this modern version has little to nothing in common with the original Mudbucker EB pickup, outside of the cover, the aesthetic, and the placement, which we learned previously has a tremendous impact on the overall tone. A couple years ago, I actually brought 8 or 9 basses to one of Chuck's rehearsals. It was for some video project that never really panned out, but one of them was this SG bass before it had a fuzz circuit installed and tape wounds on it. It was just completely stock, out of the box, and we learned that night that this pickup in this placement has the ability to fill a mix and fill a room, unlike the rest of the Warwicks and LTDs and Jacksons that we played that night. This one definitely stood out. So I mentioned earlier that this is not an original traditional Mudbucker EB pickup. This is actually a Thunderbird pickup. It's just made to fit under this cover to kind of fit that old school aesthetic. Which leads me to these two basses. This is a short scale Thunderbird and a non-reverse Thunderbird, both of which have the TBHZ, which is a passive EMG Thunderbird pickup. Now, I'm fully aware that at this point EMG has become kind of a meme around here, and even Dave wants me to do a whole video talking about my affinity for EMG and all of that sort of stuff. It's not important for this video, it's a story for another day, but what I will tell you for now is that everybody likes what they like. You have your favorite thing, I have my favorite thing, that's all good. EMG pickups, particularly in their passive kind of PJ and even in the case of these Thunderbird pickups, it's just what my ear gravitates towards. It's what I personally think an electric bass should sound like in their own respective styles. And the reason that they're in every single one of these basses back here is that it just makes my job easier having to dial in a plethora of different tones across a wide array of different pieces of musical gear, amps, pedals, etc. But again, that's another story for another day. What's important right now is this TBHZ. So now that all of that prelude is out of the way, here it is, the Thunder Horse. Let's check it out. Starting with the pickups, up at the neck position is a passive EMG Thunderbird pickup, the TBHZ. This pickup has a DC resistance of 8 kiloohms, a resonant frequency of 2.85 kilohertz, and uses a ceramic and steel magnet.
The introduction of iron inside of the coil increases that inductance. Ceramic has much lower iron content. It doesn't shave off as much of the highs because it doesn't have quite as much inductance. However, if you have a ceramic magnet and you put the steel pole pieces, then you're going to reintroduce that iron. You're going to have a warmer sound anyway. So like a pickup that's made with ceramic magnets but steel bars or steel pole pieces, the presence of the steel will warm up the sound. It will kind of taper off some of those highs in a way similar to what's happening with the Alnico.
The PJ pickups are the passive EMG PJ-HZ set and feature Alnico 5 magnets. The P pickup has a DC resistance of 11.35 kiloohms and a resonant frequency of 2.47 kilohertz. The J pickup has a DC resistance of 7.7 kiloohms and a resonant frequency of 2.4 kilohertz. Comparing the PJ-HZ set to the Geezer set, the PJ-HZ set is just a little bit hotter and a little bit brighter. They also don't have exposed pole pieces, which fit the aesthetic better. The controls are simple: 3 volumes, 1 for each pickup, and a master tone. Again, this bass is completely passive. Now, obviously, I'm not the first person to put some sort of humbucker in the neck position of a P-bass, but as far as I can tell, those are all just independent mods. I'm not familiar with anybody doing it at a kind of production level. But if the comment section is good for anything, it's proving me wrong, so let me know down below. And of course, some of us are going to be reminded of Billy Sheehan with his Mudbucker and P-bass combo, but this is different than that in a couple of ways, but the most important one is that all 3 of these pickups are fed through a single output. Which leads me to my final bass example from the wall behind me, the Gibson G3. Now, this bass is another example of kind of that perfect tone, quote unquote. These 3 pickups together produce a sound that is unlike most other instruments, and it's something that traditional P basses and jazz basses and PJs are just incapable of. And the thing that kind of turned into a happy accident is that the Thunder Horse completely evokes a lot of the hallmarks that this bass has, which is solid and consistent low end, like a glassy top end that doesn't get too piercing or shrill or harsh, and kind of that jazz bass thing where the phase cancellation scoops out some of those perfect mid frequencies that just makes this thing sound incredible in just about every mix. And that's kind of what's happening here. Now, of course, the pickups are different. They're in kind of different spots. You do get a little more versatility in choosing the pickups, but when all 3 of these are on, again, it's not 100% identical, but the things that fans of the G3 like me and Chuck, love about that bass, you definitely find here, again, with just like a slightly different kind of seasoning sprinkled on it. But again, a lot of those hallmarks of the G3 are definitely present in this bass. like the pickups, the construction is also a blend of Gibson and Fender. First, we've got basically a P-bass-ish body in a 34-inch scale, 4 inline tuners, and a hipshot kick-ass bridge. We enter Gibson territory with a 12-inch radius on an ebony fretboard. It's also got a 1.5-inch nut width, which you'll find on either a jazz bass or a traditional Gibson Thunderbird. Quarter-sawn rock maple neck, 2 dragon plate carbon fiber reinforcement rods with a 2-way spoke truss rod, inadvertently throwing in some StingRay influence there. The metal parts are all hipshot. I mentioned the kick-ass bridge, but there's also a hipshot 3-string retainer and hipshot tuning machines. Oh, and I almost forgot, the strap pins are Dunlop strap locks. The colorway is quite obviously inspired by the Les Paul Custom. Black finish, gold hardware, and an ebony fretboard. But instead of a mahogany body, which would have also been interesting, this bass features a 2-piece ash body. This bass came shipped with Labella RX nickel strings, but because I absolutely destroy uncoated strings in under an hour, this video actually features 3 different sets of strings. The RX nickels, Elixir stainless steel, and Labella stainless flat wounds. So to summarize the variety of tones that you can get with the Thunder Horse, first and most familiar is a ever so slightly hotter than normal P-bass, covering anything you'd use a P-bass for. Of course, you can do PJ for all your PJ and kind of pseudo jazz bass scoopy type of tones. we've got a Thunderbird pickup butted up against the fretboard for kind of vintage EB tones or even some dub stuff. One of my favorite combinations, which is the Thunderbird and the P together, which is going to be similar to just the Thunderbird. It's a little bit more even in its response, a little bit more rounded off, and it's great for, again, you can still do dub stuff with it, but it's really good for pop and country things. The dark horse kind of combination of the Thunderbird and the Jazz, I've heard some people say that it's StingRay-ish. I don't know if I hear that, but it's got a very interesting and distinct kind of mid-bark to it. Lastly but not leastly is all three on wide open, which, I mean, I'd be surprised if there's a genre that this can't do. Everything that we've played with that, just everything at 10 all the way up all the time, it sounds good for pretty much everything. now that I've pat myself on the back for this design and concept, the real credit goes to Cormac McGrath of McGrath Guitars for putting it together, making it a reality, and making it extremely comfortable to play. My favorite couple things, like I mentioned, I love the flatter 12-inch radius. That's kind of a Gibson standard. That's what they do across pretty much all models. Compared to Fender's 9.5 or their vintage 7, I like the flatter feel on the fingerboard. Also with this neck, this kind of unfinished maple feel, pretty sure it's a D profile. Super comfortable in the hand, feels really good. And again, like I mentioned before, the thinner 1.5-inch nut width that you find on jazz basses or the original, not original, but the standard Thunderbird. Super comfortable, just love it. It's really easy to kind of do anything you want to do up there. And finally, 6-bolt neck joint is also really nice. So again, this thing, it's obviously, as you heard, it sounds really good. The thing that you can't quite test for yourself because you're not in the room is you can't feel it, but it feels really comfortable. The mat on this, you can really feel, there we go, there's a better shot of it. You can really feel the wood grain, which is something that I'm kind of a sucker for. Like you get so used to the hard polyester plastic finishes that it's kind of nice to just feel like real wood. Don't turn that into anything embarrassing. So, like I said at the top, this was originally supposed to be just a silly, wacky, one-off idea to show McGrath's capabilities in their custom shop. Kind of a, if you can dream it, they can build it cliche thing. But as it turns out, this is actually going to enter their standard lineup. There's probably a better way to say that, but point being is you can go in and buy this base model, BASE model. You can customize the color. I think you can customize the pickups, although I'd highly recommend sticking with these because they sound great, but I do know that there is at least one, I think it's red, that's got the geezer pickups with this Thunderbird. And you know that that's going to sound great, but you can't beat the, at least for me, you can't beat the hidden pole piece. It just looks so good. So if this is something that interests you and that you want, you don't have to go with the LP custom vibe, even though I obviously endorse it. And if you want to go Seymour Duncan or Aguilar, you can do that too. But again, I would, like I said, highly recommend these because these sound awesome. Go to McGrath's website, check it out. You can put TPJ in their custom order form and you can get it in green or blue, or I think he's making one in white, which is going to look awesome. I might have to get a second one. And we may have a 5-string design coming real soon. We'll see how that goes. Let's just get through NAMM first. But until then, I think I've said all there is to say about the Thunder Horse from McGrath and the bass channel. So thank you very much for watching. You can help us win the YouTube game by hitting like and subscribing and leaving a comment and all that stuff. But anyway, here's Wonderwall.